Hi, everybody. Welcome to the fourth and final installment of Lunch with Lacey. Um, we've sort of been moving through the process of how the Lacey Act is going to impact all of us. And today we're going to talk about traceability um, and CITES. Um, just a couple quick notes, as usual. Most of the references, all of the references or resources referenced in the discussion today are available both on our website, on the Federation's website, as well as the Alliance website. We encourage you to go look at those after we get off here. Another disclaimer that this isn't all legal advice. If you have questions, you need to talk to a lawyer or a broker for your specific situation. And then finally, as usual, it's being recorded, and the meeting itself is open only to members. However, these will be made available publicly through our website, and those that will be open to anybody. So just keep that in mind. So for the last time this month, I want to thank Lynn and Brianna for being here yet again, giving so much of their time to this month, but also in the many years leading up to this. So I will hand it off to them with gratitude.
Thank you very much. You want to go ahead and pull it up, Brianna? All right, traceability of our wood stocks, how and why. And I just want this to be a reminder because it's going to look a little Pernambuco-centric. It really isn't, and it isn't meant to be. I think we've just learned many lessons from Pernambuco and what's needed in order to forward the whole concept of sustainable development. And I think that whether you're using ebony, whether you're using maple in your instrument making, all of our discussions, including today's, will impact your business as well. Next. Traceability, linking the inventory to the finished product and documenting the waste. Years ago at one of our Federation meetings, I remember Morgan Anderson kind of throwing up his hands and saying, "I don't get it. When I cut up a board to make a bow, it looks totally different. So how can I prove that the bow came from that same legal source of wood?" And he was really despairing about this. And I'm not sure at that time people had really evolved an answer to that question. And yet it's growing rapidly. And we're all at a point now where we have enough information to be able to be making really responsible, informative decisions. This is Thomas Gerbeth's bow, made in 23 from board number B and stick number 4, just for your interest. This is the German and Austrian method of stamping that they've used for the last 12 years. So, inventorying your wood, a top priority. I'm going to just read along with the slide because I think every piece of this is important. And not only do I think it's important, but when CITES hired a scientist to do a study on the traceability of Pernambuco, was it even possible to trace Pernambuco in an effort to really document the legality of the sources and just to have a very transparent system? That went to a woman named Sophia in Brazil, who wrote a document that is 53 pages long. She interviewed people from all around the world. And in that 53-page document, she gave 2 pages to this particular method, which she considered to be very significant not just for Pernambuco, but of course, CITES is always thinking about thousands of species simultaneously. So where can they find information from users of the resource or from the scientific community around the world that can help them protect all species or many species? So it has to be done to determine the amount and the origin of your wood. Doing your inventory now creates a baseline of information. So from this moment forward, you can't buy wood and add it to your inventory, or make bows and subtract it from your inventory, or break a stick and subtract it from your inventory without making that updated change to your inventory. And that's different than what we've done in the past. So you're going to start a file in which you can keep all the pertinent records. I just have a small manila envelope, bills of sale, other documentation that you might have, whatever you've got or whatever you would like to write in order to talk about where you got the wood and when you got the wood is important to include. And corresponding photos are super important to include. Dated photographs are super important. This is also important for U.S. makers. It has never been required to register your wood with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. There are a few countries around the world that required registration back in 2007, but Fish and Wildlife did not do that. They just asked us to do our personal inventories. They asked us to take date-stamped photos, to have the document notarized, and to save it in a safe place. And it was only in 2022 when we went back and asked them, was there anything else that they wanted to add to this list of recommendations? They wanted to add that inventories should be periodically updated. So if you haven't updated your inventory, like me, you never thought about it again after you created it in 2007, it's a living document. And it needs to go along with you as you buy materials or you make bows or make instruments and sell materials. So it needs to be changing. We recommend that Canadian makers also follow U.S. Fish and Wildlife recommendations unless or until they get their other instructions from the Canadian CITES Management Authority. As of when I was writing this, people didn't think that they had gotten any kind of advice whatsoever from them. So I just think any inventory is better than no inventory. And so I think it would be an important thing to do. And lastly, on this page, time is money. So if you find it faster and easier, you can hire someone to count and weigh your boards, not just Pernambuco, to create this baseline inventory. And I'll tell you that my granddaughter, who is looking for money for school, my granddaughter and her boyfriend, both looking for money for school, were happy to come over and do this. It took about 4 hours for them. They each made $100 and went home happy, and I didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting. So it was done accurately and responsibly, and it was fast. It was one Saturday afternoon. Next. Okay, so here's how it's done. So how does the board look like the finished bow? The boards are individually numbered on the end. So here's board number 25. The end was just painted with white shellac, and then a Sharpie marker indicated the number of the board. So here we have a photograph number 1 of this particular board. Keep all the photographs. The only thing I would do differently is that I would date stamp it so that that would be also part of the record. Start a journal to record all the information. And if you're just starting with individual bow blanks, the numbering system is ever so slightly different, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But just for this slide, we're starting with board number 25. Next. Okay, so this board has been cut into blanks. It was able to make 4 blanks. This picture includes the end cut. So it's obvious that this is board number 25 and 4 blanks that were created out of it. So those blanks now become 25A, 25B, 25C, and 25D. So just like with the 25, the ends are coated with white shellac and marked on there with a Sharpie marker. And then you weigh the total amount of the 4 blanks, subtract that from the board weight that you had from the last slide, and that indicates how much waste there was. Keep track of all of that in your little notebook. Okay, purchase an interchangeable steel type. This is what we're going to be using to just tap the name, the numbers, the identification numbers on the bottom of the bottom facet. Finished bows traditionally stamped with the maker's name on the side facet can now additionally be stamped on the bottom facet of the stick under the frog with numbers and letters that trace the bow to its original inventory. These are the 2 different types of 1/16 size interchangeable steel types or impression stamp set. One of them is going to be individual letters and numbers, and the other has a little holder where you can slide in the little ones, and then that can give you perhaps a straighter line. Either one of these can be used to mark the stick. The letters are sharp, don't require any heat, needed only a small amount of lamp black on the letters for readability and a light touch with a hammer. The stamp includes the board and bow blank number and the date. The bow can then be traced from finished bow back to original inventory. This is the information then that's going to be recorded on the documentation of bow materials that you give to the buyer at the time of purchase. So in this one, it's board number 295 and the year is 2024. So if there had been, this indicates to me that there was one bow blank that was created from what must have been a small board, 295. Had there been others, this would say instead 295A or 295B. But the fact that there's just one tells me that it was just one blank that was gotten from that particular board. Inventory needs to be updated regularly and notarized. For US and Canadian makers making small numbers of bows, averaging somewhere around 5 to 10 bows per year, which is our average, every few years is sufficient to make these changes. Now, we received inquiries from the CITES Management Authority in England and Kew Gardens. It includes Ireland as well. And they were very interested in what we were doing for inventories. They wanted to create, just to see if it was possible, they wanted to create an online registration form. So this would be, you would be registering with, I guess, CITES or Kew Gardens. You would be registering with someone. You would do your inventory. The inventory would go in there. They wanted to do an online update quarterly for all the makers, which I just don't see necessary because even in England, they make very few bows. So the quarterly changes would be, maybe I sold 2 sticks or whatever. It would be a very, very small number. I think they were doing that just to be able to show that this is a very small trade and also a very cooperative group of makers who would go online, and if they made 2 bows, they would subtract 2 pieces of Pernambuco and 2 blocks of ebony from their registration form, and that would be good to go. So they were trying to show that it could be quick and easy, and that there didn't need to be anything mandated. This wasn't an industry that was kicking and screaming and trying to avoid any kind of registration, but instead was cooperative and concerned about conservation. So they're working on that. I don't know where it's all going to go. I'm glad Fish and Wildlife is not, as far as I know, is not thinking about any kind of quarterly registrations. But if they do start to require registrations of any sort, those of us that have our inventories are going to be able to just send those off to Fish and Wildlife and be done with it. So I recommend that you really get going on this. It's important that what is recorded in inventory is really close to the actual amount of wood in the maker's shop. And that's what's so weird about the writing it down in 2007 and putting it in a safe place. I never thought to update it. So there was a big catching up to do. I just started over in 2022 and did an entirely new inventory at that time. And then since then, every couple of years, I'm going to be at the end of the tax year, I know how many bows I've sold, excuse me, during the year, and I'll be able to subtract that and I'll be up to date. They just want to know that you're not just making up numbers, but that what you say you have and what you have are the same or are very, very close to it. Be sure to keep all documentation and dated photographs. And for those of you that like to do things like Brianna does on spreadsheets, you can easily monitor wood purchases or reductions to the inventory, including the bow or wood sales or waste, breakage, or unusable sticks due to flaws. I just write it in my little book. Okay, I mentioned to you Sophia's report, and this is exactly what it is. This Pau Brasilia Chinata Bows Fine-Tuning Traceability Solutions. That's going in a few days. February 3rd through 8th is the next standing committee meeting in Geneva. And this will be there, an important part of the big discussion. And I'm just so pleased that this particular information that we were able to create and pass to her as a possible way for the international bow-making community to handle traceability, that it was received with the kind of consideration that it got in there. And I'm hopeful that others at CITES appreciate the efforts as well. So the goal of this article is to present a simple method that would be standardized for use by makers worldwide. When bows are traveling in and out of customs and in and out of countries, we can't have 400 different methods for this. There has to be some sort of standardization that will be clear and meet the needs of CITES, so that when bows are going in and out, their documentation will be recognizable. It'd be a standard form with standard information, standard requirements. So that's what the Alliance is working on. And that's we're doing that for you and for every musician out there and for every bow out there. It's estimated that presently 80% of bow makers in Germany with CITES registered stocks of wood follow similar guidelines. And we're playing catch up to them. They took this very seriously back in 2007, so they have these many years of experience and tracking now. And so we're not doing anything that's new. We're doing something to just get caught up with them. Makers in all countries using this method would be providing for musicians and buyers the necessary information that tracks the finished bow back to the original pre-convention inventory. And again, traceability is a top priority. This is a demonstration of makers working in cooperation with CITES by creating a method that can be a template for the conservation and sustainable use of all threatened species on which we rely. And again, just a word about CITES. They are not the enemy. We're all working together for the conservation of these species. And I think it's very, very important for us to recognize that CITES will be a part of our lives for as long as we have careers, because of the woods that we use in our instrument and bow making. And so to be able to work cooperatively is essential. Next. Okay, Brianna.
Thank you. So the League of American Orchestras started a campaign called Know Your Bow, asking musicians to know what natural resources were used to make their bow. Musicians will need help with this, and you will have a growing number of concerned musicians coming to your shops asking for information. This grew out of questions from our CITES Management Authority about the legality of bow wood, and in particular, finished bows being imported into the country. The League's response was to ask musicians to become informed about laws concerning Pernambuco and other materials used in bow making, and get the documentation needed for travel and resale. So I'll just mention that this Know Your Bow campaign went out to all the organizations listed on the bottom of this slide. And that includes 1,800 orchestras for all of the Americas. And for NAMM, which has 81,000 followers on Facebook, so quite a wide reach. Our instruments and bows will live on long after we're gone, possibly for centuries. Environmental change will continue and is accelerating, negatively impacting forests around the world. We don't use huge quantities of wood, but it is highly select and top quality. The best insurance that we have to protect that wood and the instruments and bows we create is to do a dated inventory and document that information for the musician. No matter what happens with CITES, your wood will be pre-convention and legal to use and sell in the future. And I'll add that Lynn mentioned her circumstance as a person who's been in the business for many years, wanting to have documentation on all her stock for the rest of her career, and also to be able to sell it to the next generation of young bow makers. Well, I'm one of the next generation of young bow makers who wasn't in the business back in 2007, but I want there to be verifiably legal sources of wood for me and others to use for our careers. The younger generation needs your full cooperation now to make that possible. So just to go full circle and do a brief summary of the Lacey Act. Remember, the supply chain is responsible. You need to exercise due diligence. Keep a Lacey log. This is conducting due diligence and it protects you from illegal activity. The Department of Justice weighs the level of due diligence in determining whether to pursue prosecution for a violation of the Lacey Act. And Lacey Act compliance encourages traceability and sustainable development that will protect the future of our musical traditions. Great. This slide is a reminder that we are all in this together, and the work that we do in the Alliance is critically important for makers, shops, and musicians. The Alliance needs you to help spread the word to other AFVBM members who didn't attend these sessions, to your clients, performing organizations in your local communities, anyone and everyone. The Alliance created this poster that you see here, and possibly Sarah can help send that around for downloading, or it's available on the Alliance website under Lacey Act resources. And you can put it up in your shop. You don't need to be an expert or take lots of time talking with your customers and taking valuable time away from the bench. You can just point folks to the poster and link them up to the Alliance website for more information. And of course, if there are those who want to become a member or make a donation, we'd be very appreciative. This year's CITES meeting is in Uzbekistan, so travel costs will be very expensive. If you want more information on how to help out, or if you want to join us at all, feel free to contact Lynn or myself or any of the board members in the Alliance, and we can definitely use some help. So thank you, and now let's go to questions.
If I could just add something that I forgot to include, I wanted to just share with you what the French CITES Authority decided to do with Brazilian rosewood. So we can pull down the slides and just look at each other. So there was the question with Brazilian rosewood, and they were in the same boat that we are now in with Pernambuco, with ebony, with maples. About half of the makers the guitar makers chose not to inventory their wood. And what happened was that after the vote, and it became illegal, that wood that they had not inventoried became illegal because they hadn't registered it as pre-convention wood. They were, interestingly enough, they were allowed to continue to use it. However, a statement had to be made to any buyer, any potential buyer, that this was a guitar made out of illegal wood and that they could play it in France, but they couldn't travel with it across international borders. So you can imagine in Europe, where musicians are traveling everywhere all the time, that this had a tremendously negative impact on their sales. But they had to tell people that this was illegal wood and you could only use it in France. I would not want that to happen to our stockpiles here in this country. So here's an opportunity now to really work on this. And I think I'd also just like to say a special thank you to Brianna, who spent lots of time putting this together at a time when she was evacuating because of fires, where she was moving wood stocks into safe locations, moving customers' bows, moving her own instrument, a real gypsy who was able to include this contribution in her work, which I really appreciate. She's smart, she's talented, she's well informed, and maybe for the future of IPCI and for the Alliance, here's the most important thing. She's half my age, which I think is significant because I just looked up on the wall and I've been a member of AFVBM for 40 years, and I've been a member of ILA for 25 years now. And we need new members to come in and help us carry this and move it into the future. All these environmental changes that we're talking about are going to impact this next generation and beyond that far more than it will impact my generation. So as Brianna pleaded with you, please, please, please think about us. Create the documents that you need so that we can be reassured that what we're buying is legal and that we can pass that information then on to the musicians that we sell bows to. So it's about us, but it's about those in the future. So thank you so much, Brianna.
We have a couple questions in the chat.
Yep.
As a Canadian, should I create an account with USDA Lacey Act?
No. As a Canadian, are you shipping things to the United States? Who am I talking to?
Ray?
Ray, can you just come on?
Yeah,
take
I
Hi,
have,
Ray.
hi. So I have exported instruments to the US.
Uh-huh.
Last year I used a broker. They handled everything. Obviously, I had to include all the info for the Lacey Act.
Mm-hmm.
I'm inventorying all my wood now, but I looked online to, I guess, create an account. I'm not sure if I should create an account with USDA for my inventory.
No, I think the quick answer to that is no, that's an American problem. So whoever is importing it will be the person. So if you're shipping it to an individual shop, they're the ones that are going to need it. You need to provide accurate information to them about the species, the genus and species, and the country of harvest. But it's up to someone in this United States to import it, and that's what the Lacey Act is all about. So you just have to have a good working relationship with people that you're working with. And if a broker is doing that, the broker can only be working for somebody in the United States. Is it a US broker that you're working with?
Yes.
Okay. Then the US broker will be in touch with whoever the shop is that it's going to, and they'll work that out at the other end. So all you do is provide information and let it go.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
We have one other question in the chat from Andrew Dipper. Do foreign documents relating to movement and legality of wood origin need to be translated into English?
I think if you're going to try to understand them, that makes all the sense in the world. Do you have documents coming from India? Is that what you're thinking, Andrew?
Yeah, I've got trying to deal with an Indian supplier
Uh-huh.
made pegs for us in the past, and it's a bit of a difficult job. And some of the documents are probably going to be in Hindi. So I have to make sure that those documents are actually real, not just skimmed from some other source.
Yeah. Obviously, the better you can understand them, the better you can represent them, because it's your reputation as well as their reputation that could be undermined if they're giving you faulty information. But yeah, I would think some kind of translation would be very important. It's
Yeah.
hard to know. It's hard to know what's legitimate and what isn't coming from foreign countries, because we don't necessarily know what documentation is being used everywhere.
Yeah, I've just had to deal with the US government for other things, and they have a requirement that all documents should be in English. That's the reason for the question.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay, onward.
Like Ryan has his hand raised.
Where are you, Ryan?
Hey, I'm coming. Sorry, yeah, people.
There you are. Hi.
holding me right here. Lynn and Brianna, thank you so much, and Evan, for all of the time and thought you guys have put into all this. I think it is important. So if any of my questions or whatever ever seemed like unappreciative, I am very appreciative, and also realize that you guys didn't make this law. So I'm just trying to get a grip on things. I wonder, so I guess that gives us a good guideline for bows and bowwood, but I had two questions. One is, a couple of years ago with ivory, when they started coming down on that, they were operating under the presumption that it was ivory unless we could prove otherwise. So unless you could somehow prove that it was mammoth or mastodon, or it just visually wasn't ivory, they would assume that it was. Is that sort of this? I mean, is it the same presumption here? Is it presumed that the woods are illicit unless we can document that they aren't? And that might be a question
Yeah,
for.
let me just finish. Let me add something there before you go on. There has been so many bows that our fish and wildlife people assert were made out of illegally harvested wood in Brazil. Finished bows coming to the United States, that I think they are rightly concerned and rightly suspicious. And so I think, especially, I know with orchestras traveling, that they don't have to just document the CITES listed species, they have to list all the species. So if it's not ivory, what is it? And so this gives us an opportunity then to create those documents for the traveling musicians that says it's not ivory, it's elforin, or it's whatever else. And I think the same is going to be true in the very near future with instruments, because of ebony and because of some of the maples that are being so just ravaged in Eastern Europe. So I don't think that they're just out there trying to cause trouble and making up things to worry about. I think they're reacting to major concerns that they have, and responding to that and asking us to do the same.
I'm not asserting that they're being unreasonable or without. I'm just trying to figure out, if I give advice to somebody who's traveling, what their operating protocol is, and if they're assuming that it's not legal unless we can provide documentation, that gives me a different tact than if it's something else. The other question is,
well, I wouldn't worry so much
let me
about.
get to this next question,
Go ahead.
because it's also important.
Yep.
With fingerboard, so with bows, that's great, but like, that's a really nice numbering kind of scheme. Is there, I guess, is there any kind of advice on, like with ebony, because that's coming, with like fingerboards, and then some of the things are going to get kind of tricky, like I don't know, how do you number a nut or a peg or a, you know, or for example, even just the ebony in, you know, a bow adjuster, if you're doing a divided button or a silver cap. Did they have any kind of ideas on how to do that?
I think we are thinking about using the same method, just for simplicity, the same method on everything. There's no reason why you couldn't just put a little tag on your pieces of ebony or a little numbering system, just with a pencil on the underside of the ebony, and have it be identical. I don't know whether you're cutting up your own ebony or whether you're buying finished parts, but you still, if you're importing things, you still get all of that documentation from whoever you're importing them from. And then that could be written on the back of the fingerboard and kept in that way with a date. So
Okay, so just writing it on.
I would just write it on there, and I would keep track of it in my Lacey log so that I knew that I was importing from somebody who was thoughtful about providing this kind of information to me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I have a feeling in 10 seconds I'm gonna get interrupted again. So I really wanted to get that.
No, don't worry about it. That's okay. I just think it's important that we remember that the document of the declaration of materials, document of materials, whatever you want to call it, is there to provide all of the information that they need on whatever it is. And our guides don't just have endangered species, it has all of the alternatives as well. So, and that's going to start to matter, particularly those of you who are in Canada. That's going to start to matter because Canada is very concerned about PFAS, the forever chemicals, and about anything that has formaldehyde in it. And so we need to now do our homework on some of the alternatives to determine whether or not they are safe to use and safe to transport. So the work continues, and it goes, we never know what direction it's going to go next. But all of the European countries under the EUDR will have very strict requirements about PFAS and about formaldehyde as well. And I suspect the Lacey Act will catch up to that very, very soon. Hi there, Young.
No, I'll just add something. I think the reason why we're talking about stamping the Pernambuco bows and doing the inventory with Pernambuco is just because right now that's the most crucial in terms of timeline. It's necessary now. But I think when these other woods start to go the same route, basically, I think we're going to need more input from people about, ways that we can go about doing that. So if you have ideas about ways to document ebony or stamp ebony, that would be very helpful, I think, going forward. Yes, Young.
Yeah, Young, what's up?
Ryan, if I may make a comment on some of your questions. You have some legitimate questions, and we don't have definitive answers. I think the whole thing right now is to be proactive. Even if, let's just say a lot of this inventory stuff turns out not to be necessary. It's better that you be proactive than waiting around, because logic dictates, as we've heard Lynn and Brianna talking, that it's going to get more severe on the restriction of use, not only of woods in the music trade. This is coming from the whole wood industry. The major importers themselves, the major 20-25 biggest tropical timber species companies in the world, are going around and telling everybody, hey, we need this documentation, it's coming. So here's my point to this. If the companies themselves realize that, hey, we're going to have more documentation, of course, we as the users are going to have to do it. So a lot of this stuff, even though it's going to get severe, no doubt about it, and Pernambuco is going to be the easy one, I really feel, but we have no choice. They want more documentation throughout the whole chain.
Young, one of the things that I was going to also mention to Ryan was that not every not every Fish and Wildlife CITES representative is going to know Pernambuco from a hole in the wall. But another part of what Sophia wrote in her report was the scientific testing that is now available for lots of different species. And so it's going to allow for a much greater accuracy in enforcement. And so it's important that those of us who know what we're using for species, and Young is right, we have Pernambuco, it comes from one place on the planet. Ebony is coming from so many sources. That's going to be a much greater challenge for us. So the more we know now, the better it's going to be. But there is this technology, and it's not technology that's going to be coming 50 years down the road. It's technology that exists today. And there's talk about using it and using it immediately.
Then when you're talking about that, I mean, is there a place that like I could take a violin and go, here, take the violin, look at it or do whatever, give me a list of the woods in it and send it back? And would that be practical on a, I mean, any idea what that would cost? Because
no, I don't have any idea.
That would be great, but I don't
it
know
would
if
be
it's
fantastic, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think everybody would benefit from that. But I don't think it exists yet. Do I think it will exist in the future? I do. And I think the wood that was transferred from the United States to Canada required a certain age testing on the wood. That was something that I might have mentioned in another different talk, where there was wood that had, I think Canada was requiring additional information to know that small bits that were sliced off the end of each board. The wood was tested and it indicated that it had been cut sometime in the 1950s. And so it was allowed into Canada. But that age testing, DNA testing, I don't know the details of it. That testing is already available, already being used by CITES. And it provided them with the information to make them feel secure that they could legally move that wood. And I believe that for one shipment, a small shipment, was just under $1,000. But otherwise, the shipment wouldn't have happened. So it's just, I think, the price that we will be paying as we go forward for the safety of our wood, and if we choose to ship it, that we can ship it legally and safely. Any other questions?
Like Matt has his hand raised first.
Hey, I'm going live here. I just wanted to do a really quick thing that while it's great to do your put white shellac on and then a black marker, this is a really good marker that's just straight out white.
Oh, cool. Okay.
You know, and anytime I'm working on, you know, it marks onto ebony even really, really well. So those are
Excellent.
out there. This brand is it's by Uni, it's the Posca. So that'll reduce one step in this sort of annoying thing that needs to be done. I agree, but then that way you can just use the marker one bit and not the white stuff and then the black stuff.
Great idea.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
Peter has his hand raised.
Where are you, Peter? There you are. Hi.
Hey guys. I don't know that I have a question, but I do have some sort of rambling thoughts, and that is the idea of the end user not just getting an instrument or a bow, but us also providing documentation in one way, shape, or form. And it's like we have the bow or the instrument, but then we also have an information packet that goes with each thing that we make, and that's kind of that seems really new for us, and is probably something we're going to have to get used to. You know, we are in the information age after all. But as an instrument maker, you know, how far potentially down the rabbit hole are we going to go with itemizing and numbering each rib, each lining, each corner block and end block, tops and backs, scroll, and then the fittings side of it as well. I know that we can only do the best we can in terms of what makes sense. But then also, I was just thinking about like how much extra work and time and value that we're then putting into the information side of these things that we make, and then, potentially adjusting our prices accordingly in order to, still be able to, get, get paid for all of that extra work that we're doing. So again, I don't really have a question, just like some thoughts. And that's all I wanted to say.
You know what? I think we're all feeling that way, but I think we have to remember that as forests decline and as this wood that we're using becomes more precious, that spending a little extra time to protect its safety, because remember, we're talking about it lasting for way beyond us. These instruments and bows are going to live for decades or centuries. And so in order to think about the safety, the future safety of those, the more information that we can document now, the better. And there's a price to pay for that. And that doesn't mean that the makers have to take the hit. I think if you spend time creating the document and researching whatever is required for it, that should be included into the cost of the sale. Otherwise, musicians aren't going to have the security they need to be able to travel or to keep it, to use it in the future. So it's just, it's the price that we all have to pay, I think, for using these precious and rarer than ever and continuing challenges with the forests. It's the price that we pay for living in our world as it is today. It's not a nice answer, but I think it's a truthful answer that we have a responsibility to provide that information, even if it takes our precious time away from the bench. That's where I'm thankful to have a granddaughter who likes to help out around the shop as long as I pay her properly for it. And then she does all that kind of work that I don't want to have to do. Any other questions?
From Tom.
Hi.
Hi, Tom.
I want to piggyback on the sentiments that Ryan put out there and want my comment to not sound unappreciative, but just trying to process all this. And in the context of what Peter just said about how far do you go? I mean, we can't weigh our purfling or linings, for example. So again, in the context of that, the bigger question is, what sort of pushback, maybe it's the only word that comes to mind, to the people who create these regulations is going on, so that they understand that the spirit of what they're doing isn't getting lost in the details of how much documentation. It can get to a level of absurdity when you start thinking about, the 1.3 grams of wood taken off of a violin bridge. So is there a limit? Is there a place that these regulations can get to that says, okay, this is where it makes sense. Beyond that, it's not necessary,
That's such an important question. And I can't say enough about the importance of us being represented at CITES. John Bennett is our representative. He represents the Federation. He represents ILA. He's paid by the Alliance, so your dues help there. And there's one other, who else? Oh, IPCI USA, he also represents. He works very carefully with the League of American Orchestras and brings information from the musical community to CITES. He's not a member of CITES, he's not a voting member of CITES, but he's a trusted partner with them, as is Heather Noonan from the League. And they bring information to CITES about what's manageable and what isn't, what's reasonable and what isn't. what we can do to help, what's needed. And so even if it was the importance of the work that they did, they've been doing this together for about 15 years. It's evolved into a much larger musical instrument group. It includes now all of the woodwind instrument makers, all of the guitar makers, piano makers, all of the people in making instruments that use natural resources. And so it's grown to about 25 different members now, thanks to John. And I think they bring such useful information. So they were the ones that were able to get the de minimis regulation on ivory, so that a teeny little bit of ivory on a tip was going to be okay to pass with, so that older bows weren't going to be damaged in the process of replacing those tips. CITES would never have thought of that on their own. Never, ever, ever would they have thought of that on their own, because they make rules and that's that. But for them they actually come now to John and to Heather and ask for their sentiments on things. And so they're always pushing for what they call a balanced solution, that you can't have conservation without also having a strong support of these artistic endeavors, and that you can have both. You don't have to destroy music in order to save the trees. You can do both. And we are very thankful that we have John Bennett there representing us. We wouldn't be where we are today and working on these solutions that we hope will be understood and respected and voted on for us to be able to continue conservation work in Brazil by sticking with a clarified Appendix 2 listing, which would give us all the benefits and without the harm of an Appendix 1 listing. So we are well represented there. And I really appreciate, Tom, having an opportunity to be able to let you know we're not in this alone, and we are very, very well represented. Go ahead, Young.
Well,
just Tom, just to expand a little bit what Lynn is saying, and she said it very correctly. There's this music sector recognized by CITES now. When I say recognized by CITES, I'm talking on the international level, also in the United States. Mm-hmm. So Lynn touched on this, that there's this consortium that John started. When he first went in 2000, I forget when it was 10 or 11, he was the only person, even from any music sector around the world. So he's put together around 20 people now, 20 groups. It is a worldwide group effort. So we have people in France, belong to Germany, people who represent orchestras, represent the woodwind trade. So I think it's also important to understand that, yes, in the violin world and the bow world, I'll speak for the bow people. We always thought everything's all about bows. No, now they're looking at all of these woods, and what all of us need to understand. We have this music sector which is recognized by CITES, and so all of the information that's gathered all around the world, it comes through this group that presents information to CITES. So people like Lynn and myself, a few others, we've been quite busy this last month with calls almost every week, literally around the world, trying to harmonize our thoughts to present documents to CITES that represents not only bow makers, but the entire music sector. So if you can keep that in mind, I think it will help, because I don't see CITES getting ridiculous like what you're talking about. For instance, we basically told CITES, there's no way you're going to be able to do this stuff with old bows. It's not possible. There's too many bows out there. So we're working on we're trying to work on this.
Well, I think just speaking for violin and, instrument makers, I think we all draw the line in the sand where it crosses over from reasonable to, is this really necessary? And That's what I'm not sure about, because just, when we're talking about identifying the source of wood from the nut, just as an example, or the saddle, that starts to get into a level where it gets a little bogged down. What the real message of protecting these resources gets lost in this level of detail. And so I think, for me, I'm still waiting for that line to settle out in a place that makes sense. And I'm totally in support of the big concept here, protecting these resources. So that's really not where I'm coming from. It's just
Tom, it's about protecting the resource, but it's talking about sustainability on all ends, whether it's the tree, whether it's music itself, whether it's the makers.
Yeah.
That is, we need to find a balanced approach to all this. And I think that conservation, in my limited experience with conservation now for 25 years, there is a very big shift in the thinking. It used to be just protect, stop it. Doesn't work. You stop something with a tree, or hey, look at elephants. It only spurs on the black market. Sorry. And even CITES themselves know this.
Mm-hmm.
I see Peter's hand up, and if I can just interject something quickly before we go to Peter. And I think it sort of ties all these things together, is that John is a great representative. One of the things we can do to help John is be proactive, right? If we do all these things, it gives him ammunition to take to CITES to say, here's a group of people who are interested in being partners in this and not fighting it. And it seems to me that can only have a positive outcome in terms of the restrictions that are put on us. So wherever we draw that line, Tom, I agree. That line is a hard thing to find. It's much easier with bows. With instruments, it's much harder. But wherever we find that line, I think the point is that the more proactive we can be, the more we show we can be a good faith partner.
Yeah.
Peter?
There were some very kind words that were said about the Federation in Sophia's report. So if you haven't glanced through it, I think you would see that the Federation had made a real effort to reject this whole idea of using illegal wood, and that the website was informative, that it was that you were acting proactively. And believe me, every single time we talk, I'm counting heads, I'm providing that information to John. Everybody knows everything that's going on, every article that's written, phone calls that are received, talks at the VSA, talks here for lunch with Lacey. John gets all of that information, and has now for about 5 years. So that when he writes his information documents this time of year, it's about 26 pages of really detailed information, and everything that we are doing as an industry is included in that. That's an important part of what he has to say. And thank you all for being part of that. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for all the work on this. It's really incredible. I'm very grateful. I just had a quick question. Hypothetically, for those of us sending our finished work to the EU, how would we keep up to date with what you've mentioned about the new EU regulations coming this year?
Everything that we will find out about will be right up on our website. So we have a section there where we just keep adding new information. I think in one of the last slides that Brianna shared, I do pride the Alliance as being a trusted source of information, because there's a lot of misinformation going around out there. And the Alliance is doing its best to create the best, most accurate information for you. So as soon as we hear something, it's going to be up there and running. If you're shipping to a separate country, I would be dealing with people in that country to find out what the regulations are at this moment in time. Again, all we were trying to do is to make sure that our instruments and bows stay safe, that they aren't damaged or confiscated or extensive fines or any kind of other unexpected stuff. If we can avoid all of that just by being a little cautious and sending a few emails or making a few phone calls, I think it's worth our while. And then by December of 2025, we will have, I believe, the new and harsh, extremely harsh regulations, the EUDR regulations will be in effect. Once they're in effect, then we'll be able to share all of that information with everybody. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but it will be informative for us, and it's going to encourage a much greater level of transparency for wood going into the European Union. So it will be helpful for us to know where our stuff is coming from. Any other quick questions? Well, you know where to find us. If you have any questions that come up later on, be sure to give a holler and I'll do my best to answer them. There were questions that were asked during the weeks that I have not yet been able to get answers to, like AI, and I haven't forgotten them. I just know that our experts are up on Capitol Hill trying their best to protect their jobs and all the work that they do that's so important. I think they're just distracted and unable to get back to us at this time. But as soon as I have answers, I'll let you know.
All right. Well, thank you guys again so much for all of the work and all the time these past 4 weeks. It's been informative. I did want to say it feels like still the beginning of a conversation as opposed to ending anything. So if you have questions as you go through this process, I'm sure things will come up. And as Lynn said, she's available to answer them. If there are things that aren't on the website that you think would be helpful, if there's information that you think we need to add somewhere, you can reach out to me or Lynn, and we'll try to get stuff up there. And I guess with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks.